lot of you guys are waiting for it. Finally, the oldest active blood gangs in Los Angeles. But I got to make a slight clarification by what I actually mean by that, because most of these neighborhoods existed prior to the blood identity. So you might ask, well, when did the blood identity start? Well, it's kind of difficult to pinpoint the actual month and year it started. But we do know that in 1972, all of the Crips were fighting with a bunch of other neighborhoods that did not want to align themselves with Crips. So for lack of a better word, we're going to call those neighborhoods the anti-Crips. Then around 73, 74, 75, somewhere in there, a lot of these anti-Crips began to coalesce and come together to fight off the Crips. And then perhaps maybe around 77, maybe as late as 1978, the blood identity was put on it. But the gangs right now on this list are the oldest currently active blood gangs in Los Angeles. But remember, they all existed prior to the blood identity. The Mad Swans are one of the oldest blood gangs in Los Angeles. They've been active here since about 1972, 73. And for many years, people wondered where did they get this name, Mad Swan, which is usually denoted by MS. And some believe it comes from Main Street, the street that I'm standing on right now. And others even say that in the very, very early years of Mad Swan, they were allied with some of the Crips that were in this area. In fact, Raymond Washington started his East Side Crips in this neighborhood right on 76th Street. There's probably some truth to early Swan history and early Crip history being intertwined. But another development that I just learned today is that Raymond Washington's house that was just here a couple of months ago has been torn down, and some sort of multi-unit townhouse looking duplex has been put in its place. I'm standing right here on 77th and San Pedro in front of the world famous Fremont High School here in South Los Angeles on the east side. For decades, this is a safe haven for teenagers who are blood affiliated to come to, and it's right here in the middle of Swan neighborhood. Most of Mad Swan Blood's turf goes from Manchester to Florence along Wadsworth and McKinley, but then there's a small section of its turf that extends west all the way to Broadway, and the part that extends west is roughly between 79th to the south and Florence to the north. So I'm standing on 84th and McKinley on the south side of Mad Swan Blood turf. And over the years, this gang has developed 4 different cliques. They have the 77th Street Mad Swan Bloods, the 79th Street, the 80th Street, and the 84th Street Mad Swans. Now, there's also the Family Swan Bloods, which is another gang, and they have 2 cliques of their own, not to be confused with the Mad Swan Bloods. The Swans are another black gang that shares its turf with the Latino street gang called Florencia 13. Now, a lot of people believe that F13 is one of those anti-black gangs because of their 15, 16-year rivalry with the East Coast Crips. But in this community, the Mad Swan Bloods and the Florencia 13 gang, they coexist peacefully. There have been no incidences, there have been no crime, conflict, drama, violence, generally speaking, between the Swans and the F13s. Yes, I'm on 92nd and Bandera in unincorporated Los Angeles County, and this is home of the 9 Deuce Bishop Bloods. They are one of the oldest bloods in Los Angeles, and they've been out since the very early 1970s. In fact, the gang started right here on this street on Bandera after a bunch of youth from this neighborhood got into it with some East Side Crips. And that conflict goes back to either 1971 or 1972. All right, I'm standing on Beach and 87th Street, and this is a part of Bishop neighborhood where I found some graffiti on the street here. And here you can see 92nd East Side Bishop's CK for Crip Killer. I'm standing on Graham, just north of 92nd Street, and Graham actually serves as the west boundary of the 9 Deuce Bishop Bloods. Now, although the Bishop Bloods claim Watts, technically this part of Los Angeles is not Watts. This is unincorporated Florence. Watts is actually on the other side of 92nd Street. And they go pretty much from 92nd to the south to about Firestone to the north. Traditionally, this neighborhood went from about 92nd Street between Graham and roughly Alameda back in the 80s and 90s during its heyday. But it's a much smaller turf now, but still around the same core area, 88 to 92nd along Bandera, Holmes. And back in the days, this was the heart of Nine Deuce Bishop Blood neighborhood. And when they started in the early 70s, this was all predominantly African American. Very few Latinos lived in this community, but today it's majority Latino, and in fact there are probably 2 or 3 different Hispanic gangs in this area. And over here to my right, you can see W13, W13 for Watts 13, and over here to over my left shoulder, you can see W13 written in red graffiti. So this is one of those neighborhoods that's in transition. It's changing demographically, and eventually it'll probably be a majority Latino neighborhood in the next decade or 2. I'm standing on the street that this gang is named for, the Denver Lane Bloods. They're active not only here in South Los Angeles, but they have another set in Pasadena. And I'm standing right in front of some Denver Lane Blood graffiti. On the far side, you see HCG, which is for the Hoovers. And the Denver Lanes and the Hoovers have been involved in violent clashes for years. In fact, both these gangs, the Hoovers and the Denver Lanes, existed before the Crip and Blood identity even existed. But they also share this neighborhood with another gang, with a Latino gang called South Los. And if you look right here on this mural behind me, you see SXL, which stands for South Los, a predominantly Mexican-American Chicano street gang. And these two gangs have existed here for many years peacefully. So there are no issues in this community between the black gang and the Latino gang here in South Los Angeles. In fact, the South Los are crossed out by another Latino gang called F13. Standing on Figueroa, one of the main thoroughfares that goes through the heart of the Denver Lane Bloods neighborhood. But this stretch of Figueroa is actually known as the Hoe Stroll. It's this stretch right here from Imperial to Century that has the highest concentration of prostitution along Figueroa. So you can come out here on any day and see some young girls, some young ladies standing on the corner, as you see over my right shoulder, and that's just commonplace here. I'm standing on 115th and Figueroa, right on the north side of the 105 freeway. Before this freeway was built, the Denver Lane neighborhood actually extended south of 115th all the way to about maybe 118th, 119th. But then when they built this freeway, a lot of the houses and apartment buildings were destroyed, and it pushed a lot of the residents north of this area. Back in 2012, the FBI and the LAPD did a gang sweep throughout this entire neighborhood, focusing on this building, and indicted about a dozen members of the Denver Lane Bloods. On that same day, the city attorney's office filed a gang injunction against the Denver Lanes. So this is the only gang in the history of Los Angeles to be federally indicted and then get a gang injunction on the same day. But here we are in 2016, the Denver Lane Bloods are still active. They're still the dominant gang in this area. And it shows that the indictments, the gang injunctions, the tools that they say is supposed to bring peace and calm to the community, they just don't work. I'm standing on Palmer and Bradfield on the east side of Compton, what was once known as the Lueders Park Hustlers neighborhood. When the Pirus became stronger and made a larger presence in Compton, the Lueders Park Hustlers eventually became the Lueders Park Pirus in the very early 1970s, and they became pretty much the strongest and most active neighborhood on the east side of Compton in the 1970s. I am in Lueders Park on the east side of Compton. The Lueders Park Pirus actually play a significant role historically because they were major players in Death Row Records during the founding of that record company in the early 1990s. it was Lueders Park Piru members that really helped bring success to that company, whether they were producing, doing artwork, or just doing bodyguard work. I'm standing on Compton Boulevard and Bullitt Street on the east side of Compton, and this is pretty much the south side of Lueders Park Piru neighborhood. Their territory goes roughly from Rosecrans to Compton Boulevard, from Bullitt, where I'm standing at now, all the way east to Atlantic Drive. So I'm standing on the 14,000 block of Cook Acre Street in the east side of Compton. Actually, this part of Compton is unincorporated. It's not actually part of the city of Compton, but it's adjacent to it. And back in the early 1970s, there was a party right behind this house. Clifford Ray Johnson came to this party back in February 1973, and he encountered several of the up-and-coming Crips of the area at that time. And a fight started in the back of the house, and then it came out here into the front, and he was stabbed multiple times, and he succumbed to his injuries in February of 1973. And that's an important date in gang history in Los Angeles, because he's the first Piru member to be murdered by a Crip. And his death actually helped form what would eventually become the Bloods. I'm standing right here in the Nickerson Garden Housing Projects in Watts, California, which is home to the Bounty Hunter Bloods. There are 1,054 units in about 156 buildings. This was designed in the 1950s, and the architect, people don't know this, was a black architect named Paul Revere Williams. On this east side of the project, they have a wall and a mural where there's all kind of artwork, and one of the most interesting ones to me is the mural that says "Nobody can stop this war but us," this goes back to the early 1990s, when this neighborhood and several other neighborhoods were part of a truce to try to bring some calm to the city and try to reduce the violence. They also have murals to everyone that has passed, that have lived here, not just gang members, but family members and friends. And the mural contains literally hundreds of names. Prior to the Bounty Hunters, there was a gang here called the Green Jackets. And then eventually the Bounty Hunter identity took over. So their turf is roughly Imperial to the south, 108th to the north, and Willowbrook to the east. And parts of their turf actually extend all the way west to Avalon. For an east side neighborhood, that is a significant turf. And I believe it makes the Bounty Hunters the largest blood gang on the east side and the second largest of all black gangs on the east side. Now, over the years, the Bounty Hunters have formed several sub-cliques within its gang, including the Lot Boys, the Block Boys, 111th, 112th, 113th, 114th, and 115th, and also where I'm standing at now, Bellhaven. And right here I'm standing in front of graffiti that's specific to the Bellhaven clique of the Bounty Hunters. It's B with an H inside the B, Bellhaven Bounty Hunters. One of the dudes that financed Death Row Records was from this neighborhood, and also Tupac Shakur rapped with a group of guys that were also from this neighborhood named Operation From the Bottom, OFTB. But also another interesting thing about this neighborhood is that law enforcement and the government have suppressed this gang in every possible way that you can. There have been a gang injunction in 2003. There have been local sweeps by the LAPD and the Sheriff's Department, and the feds in 2004 also came in here and swept up about 40 guys and arrested them. But here we are in 2016, and the gang is alive and well, and it just goes to show you that oversaturation, that massive suppression efforts that arrest dozens and dozens of youth, it doesn't really have any long-term impact on a neighborhood or a gang like the Bounty Hunters. You just watched part one of the oldest blood gangs in Los Angeles, but don't go away because part two's coming real soon.
Thanks for watching StreetGangs.com. Please share and like the video you just watched. Leave a comment below and tell us what you think. You can also watch 2 of our previous videos. Don't forget to subscribe.